Yeah.
I thought I broke my leg.
Yeah.
Because it was so loud.
I don't know.
I skied the rest of the day.
I
I can only turn. I can only turn left, or I can. I can only turn.
One way.
I can only turn this way across the mountain. So it's go all the way this way. I have to kind of limp down this way because I couldn't.
Ski
put
backwards.
Any weight. I couldn't put any weight on the one leg.
Yeah. But I snowboarded the next 3 days. I just iced it and elevated it. And still something ain't quite right, so I'm gonna have to get it checked out.
We're recording. Sorry.
Jerry Roslin's here, wants to speak on the facilities master plan. Okay. I guess Terry's
Jeff,
here
I got
too.
your email. I didn't know if y'all had
Anyway, so
saw that. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if y'all saw that letter or not.
What's that?
Well, I keep seeing letters to the editor about, well, why don't you put the courtroom in the law enforcement center? I'm like, here. So y'all did that a while back or whatever. Somebody just didn't get the memo.
No, I mean, you did a good. I mean, it was a good story about it. It explained it, I thought, pretty well. Don't worry, John's gonna have to come up. So, why did he do that? All right, are you ready, Betty?
Yeah. I'll get, okay. That's fine.
I will call the commission to order. Do we have any minutes or reports?
I have our fees, county clerk's fees for March was filed.
Do you have any commissioner committee liaison reports or announcements of upcoming meetings and or events? Since we have a meeting again tomorrow, anything between now and tomorrow?
just, I think each of us are meeting with the auditor tomorrow, aren't we?
Oh yeah, before, I mean,
With Williams Keepers. And then
That'll be quick.
Salute
Nope,
to America
nope,
tomorrow.
nope.
So,
I have a meeting with the mayor tomorrow morning. Okay. Then I think the first, last, and only item on the agenda, if memory serves me correct, because I can't access the drive currently. No. Don't know why. Would be the discussion of facilities master plan. I think we asked Judge Beadham to come up and talk a little bit about the letter and what the court's requirements are. So, Judge, if you don't mind coming up front, and hey, Betty, could you sling a microphone in front of him?
It's going to do a lot for a judge.
Send my help away.
Floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. No one was available, I think, the last time this topic came up. At this instant, Judge Joyce is the second day of a jury trial. Judge Green is picking a jury for a 4-day jury trial. Judge Sodergren is waiting through all the tickets that have been issued in the last 30 days. Just as a matter of background, and most of you are aware of that, less weighted workload shows us the third busiest circuit in cases per judge in the state. Eventually, we're going to get another judge, and we've talked before about the needs for a courtroom. Even with the jail visitors going across the street, we're still estimating about 85,000 people come through the courthouse every year. Some of those are lawyers who come through more than once per day, but that's still people we have to deal with. We've excused members of the bar that have been previously cleared on security screenings, which has kind of helped with some of the lines which are there. We have 2 judges assigned to Cole County, Judge Richardson from Montauk and Judge Schulmeyer from Osage County, who we are using on a fairly regular basis to cover cases and dockets. And so, which is, increasing the number of times I've got 5 judges in 4 courtrooms. And, appreciate, like today, until about 4:30 last night, I had a trial scheduled for this morning. and and things go off, and I don't know, Mark is aware of that, but we still have to plan for those. What's out there. We rotate courtrooms on a regular basis. That's something that I made a priority, particularly when I became in charge of the large courtroom. And I think you've been over there, Chris. I know you've been invited. Jeff, I don't know if you have some sort of fear of coming over there.
I'm over there a lot.
He said he had bad experiences twice before, right?
I've checked with Mark, and he's not on any list that we check on a regular basis, so I don't know that. Sometimes that explains a reluctance to attend court. But anyhow, while national trends would suggest a decline in jury trials, we're not seeing that in Cole County. Since in the first 3 months of calendar 2014, we've had 8 jury trials and 30 days of jury trial. That's both criminal and civil cases put together. I mean, that's just astounding. 30 days of jury trial is more than we probably would do in a year. I went back and looked a couple of years ago. We don't have the ability to select 2 juries at one time. We run overlapping trials. I think when I wrote my letter, I could think of 3 occasions, and today would be 4 occasions where we had overlapping jury trials. And we're seeing more and more complex trials. I went back and looked at what I had scheduled for the rest of the year. You know, I've got 8 one-day criminal trial dockets scheduled, but I've got a couple 2-day criminal trials. 2-day criminal trials are fairly rare, but when you start looking at the technical evidence we have in these cases, you get longer trials. I've got 2-day civil trials, 5 3-day civil trials, 4 3-day civil trials, and 2 5-day civil trials. Now, that's all scheduled between now and the end of the year. Most of those cases probably won't go. But sometimes I don't know until the Sunday before the trial starts. And if you think about a trial when you're flying in witnesses, you're booking tickets and everything else like that, a bunch of those I have double set. And which is, from a lawyer point of view, Mark will tell you that, you know, if you don't know whether or not your case is going, you can't do anything else. But our Division I courtroom, the big courtroom, can only handle 74 potential jurors, and that's with the folding chairs. We use this for our docket calls in criminal and juvenile, which typically have more than 75 cases at a time. I think you've been over there, Chris. I know Mark has been over there. I know that I've stopped some of Mark's cases to take care of business that we have over there. And so we couldn't select a jury, couldn't get a big enough pool in many cases on a Wednesday because we're using it for so many other things. And so that sort of limits some of the things that we can do. You would ask us for what we thought our space needs were. You didn't tell me anything about the size or anything else like that. So we went through and among the judges we discussed it. You know, one of the things that we think would help us is gallery seating for 100. I mean, I realize there are size limitations for that, but the question to us is, what do you think you need? We are picking large jury pools. When you asking people to serve on, I know that Pat's got 2 30-day trials scheduled in 2015. I've got a 2-week capital trial scheduled in 2015. I have a bunch of stuff stacked up. I don't normally set next year until August, so I've got a better handle on what to look at to distribute those things out there. But when you can only do 75 people and you're talking about pools of 300 or 350, you add another day to the jury selection process. And I think jury selection costs us about $1,000 a day in terms of people coming there. But even aside from the gallery aspect of it, and that affects our ability to do the large dockets to keep people in the courtroom as opposed to in the hallway, on the steps, really around the outside of the building. Another need that we have, and we realize these are our needs, and so that you can incorporate those into your plans, is we need more space in front of the bar, what we call the well, where the lawyers sit. I think if you come over there and you can see, for your typical divorce case, it's not a big deal. But if I have a multi-party case, some of the political cases that we do that Mark has been involved in, if you do a med-mal case, you got a lawyer for Dr. A, Dr. B in the hospital. I tried a medical malpractice case where the plaintiff couldn't sit at the table because it was filled with defendants and their lawyers. If you look at the Division IV courtroom, it is so tight that the victim, the victim's family, everybody's in full reach of the defendant who's sitting at the end of the table. And so you know, you can talk more with Mark about that, but just in terms of space to try cases, where you've got enough room that's out there. You know, technology resources, in the days when we used to run to Kinko's and have a 2x4 poster made of something else like that, now we're getting animated video presentations. It is routine to have a PowerPoint in the trial, and, you know, we've got one outlet to do those sorts of things there. ADA accessibility is another need that we have. We don't have very good ADA accessibility anywhere, but for witnesses, counsel, parties, and jurors. Those are all issues we have there. Obviously, conference and witness rooms with each courtroom goes those sort of needs there. We want to think about bathrooms for potential jurors. And one of the reasons that it takes 15 minutes to do any jury break is that's what it takes to run them through the bathroom. And then I know that on the days when we have large panels here for selection, we sort of overwhelm the courthouse facilities for bathrooms, because when this building was built, you just didn't have that many people. We also want to think about secure transfer of persons in custody. We still, as much video as we use, and we use as much video as we can, we're still bringing inmates down the hall in front of everybody, which is a security issue. The last thing is we look at different options which are out there, is whatever we look at, we think should be included in what we call the security envelope of the courthouse. If you could build a whole separate building, but if you did courts in two places, you'd be duplicating the scanners, the security people who are at those things like that. So we've talked about that. We've tried to use the federal courthouse. We got turned down for that. I think those are probably the big topics in terms of space. I think you guys have addressed the issue of what buildings we can use for what purposes. If you want some more comments on that. So, but that's sort of what we see our space needs are for another courtroom, and then within that courtroom, space to try cases. And like I said, I don't think we can solve the one problem. We can certainly solve some of the other ones. So I'm trying to answer any questions that you have.
Chris, Jeff?
Are night courts out of the question?
Pardon?
Night courts, are they out of the question?
Well,
That's been brought up, so
The
just want to throw it out there.
night courts, I really tried to do that in juvenile. I thought that was important for both kids not missing school and parents not missing work. When you look at the resources it takes to have a night court, okay, first I got to have security to screen people coming in the building. Secondly, then I have my juvenile officers, I have the children's division workers, I have all the attorneys and everything else like that. I got tremendous pushback just in terms of the cost. I mean, we're starting before 9, 3 to 4 days a week. I run till 5, 3 or 4 days a week. You could look at night courts, but it's a staffing issue. And so, I mean, that's something I think that you could look at, but there's a cost associated with that too.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I know we've tried to have night meetings too, and it wasn't met real happily with staff. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do, so I was throwing it out there.
I know the city did do night court, and they've gone away from it because it created so many problems.
Well, we pull into so many more people. Even in the city, you're dealing with basically the city and the police department from a security point of view, and the lawyers and the parties. If I do a criminal law day at night, I got to get probation and parole people to come over to the courtroom, and I don't know what that does with when their people have to work after 5. If I do juvenile court, I get juvenile officers, I've got children's division workers, I've got my CASA workers, I've got the Missouri Alliance workers. It just runs into a whole lot of people. So I looked at it and just couldn't get very far. And I start earlier and run later than most people.
Yeah,
I'll attest to
I don't
that.
feel sorry for them. They just work on schedules. You work late, you're going to come in late. They got their 40-hour week
Yeah.
work week, and that's different than a lot of other work.
You know, I do run 2 juvenile dockets and 3 during docket weeks because I don't want kids to miss school. And we work with parents, and if I got a parent who works till 3, we'll hold it till 4. We try to do some of those things. But the other thing to understand about docket calls themselves, the origin was the day I rode my horse into town to have court. And as judges, we have court, just trials, like I did yesterday where I tried a domestic case. you've got dockets where that's sort of your case management, how you line stuff up, and then of course you have the administrative and what I call chambers work, where I read all these papers that people send to me. For next week's juvenile court, I think I've already got 27 social summaries that I would like to read before I get to court to do those sorts of things like that. And so we looked at more dockets, and we have more dockets now than we did when I started. But you reach a point, because a docket is sort of a hard-coded, fixed time to do court, and you can't set trials on top of dockets. So every half a day I take for dockets takes away a half a day I have to try divorce cases. And I'm double and triple setting divorce cases right now. I mean, you can ask any lawyer in Division I, if you need more than about an hour, you're 3 months out. And in terms of setting those sorts of things there. So the other pushback we ran into is we continue to push like our video dockets to take the pressure off the Wednesdays. But if I require the prosecutor to be there and the public defender to be there, that's 2 or 3 hours that they can't be out getting ready for trial, meeting with their clients. I mean, there's a trade-off. We looked at it. We think we hit the maximum number of dockets we can do at a time.
How much space do you think you need for the well? I mean, when I was over there the other day, you got one table for both attorney and prosecutor, and I would assume that ideally you'd want two. I mean, each one would get their own table.
I think if you have an 8-foot table, 2 8-foot tables, and then space around, those would probably be sufficient. I mean, you could take like the big courtroom and reorient it, take out about 3 rows of gallery seating. The doors don't work that way.
Right.
But conceptually, you could fit it probably in the same space, which you end up with a courtroom that is very functional for trying cases. And so if we picked a jury and then could go down there and try the case, we're ahead of where we are. Right now, we pick a jury downstairs, we go upstairs, and people sit on top of each other. In the civil cases and in the criminal cases.
So is the problem more in selecting a jury than it is in trying the case, or?
Well, the gallery seating affects selecting a jury.
Mm-hmm.
It affects how long it takes us to find a panel in these more complex cases. We'll spend an hour or two just going through in a complex cases. Can you serve for 30 days?
Right.
If we're using surveys to rule out people who are so one-sided that it's not worth our time to interview
Sure.
them, those things like that. So I mean, it's but you can't. The typical recommendation, I think, for like a district courtroom is like 2,400 square feet. But that also has some gallery seating in it, and for most trials, you don't need as much gallery seating, and we could accomplish more bang for our buck, if you'll allow, by making a larger well and make it a better place to try cases. Because for the most part, for trying cases, as opposed to calling dockets, for trying cases, galleries aren't a real big deal. I mean, you always have some, and there are public trials, you need to have some space. But like you could take, like the courtroom we have in Division I, move the bar back, so many feet, take out 3 rows of gallery seating, and you probably could use, it's just how you orient the space. And if you say, we can't do the large gallery and the large well, then that's something we can't do. And then we go back and what could we do? I think a large well would advance us, would achieve a number of our goals.
So I know there's been some thought and just some ideas thrown out about some type of a balcony or something over, just to try to accommodate some of that. I mean, other than getting into some really large space to try to accommodate 100, I mean.
Or you could theoretically restore the old balcony. Think about that. It's up there where the
Right.
drug court people are, what used to be the old prosecutor's office. It's not incredibly functional for selecting a jury.
Right.
Think about how difficult it is to do communion in church, collect the offering in the balcony. It's an
Sure.
entirely separate system. So, public demand for observation probably isn't that high. It's really being able to get to the people.
Okay.
And in terms of the jury selection, in terms of stashing, getting people, I mean, if you go over there today, well, they're probably in there, but to get a jury panel of 74, I got to call in 100 people, 85 to 90 will show up depending upon where we are in the term. And I got people sitting on the floor, they're sitting on the stairs, they're sitting in the jury room. You know, it's just a way to get people out of the hallway.
So normally when you would select, if you had a pool of 350 or whatever, you try to split it up into 4 pools of 75, or
Right.
if it's
I mean,
300,
I've
3
kinda
pools of
mixed-
100.
I tried a couple of these hog farm cases up in northwest Missouri, and trying to look at how you manage jury pools for complex trials. And you really have 2 issues off the bat in complex trials. You have the people who are so polar that the 20 minutes you spend trying to rehabilitate them as a juror is not efficient. The second thing is people whose actual availability is to serve. I mean, when you're talking about trying a 3 and 4 week jury trial, you're talking about a substantial commitment of time. And, you know, we like the bias issue we try to deal with in terms of juror surveys, but the attendance issue, you know, you can do about 75 people. I think you could do 100. I've never had a venue where I could seat 100. I think you could probably do 100 at a time. But when we went through 350 people on the last version, the last capital trial. And I know we're looking at 2 capital trials for sure, not counting all these long civil trials.
So when we talk about a gallery of 100, and we're looking at a facilities master plan and trying to do something that'll last the next 20 years, I mean, is this feasibly, I mean, nobody can predict the future, but is this feasibly something that would take us through the next 20 years? Or, I mean, do you anticipate our caseload going up even more? Or?
Well, is the caseload going to go up even more? No. I mean, I don't think the trends are looking that way. Criminal seems to be flat. Everything else seems to have stabilized out a little bit lower than it was about 3 years ago. The only issue in terms of gallery is picking juries for large trials. And, you know, for a civil trial, we could explore some alternative venues. We looked at Miller Performing Arts. They only want $500 to open up that facility and use it, you know, to pick those large venues. I mean, it's just, that would be nice to have, but it's, you know, if it's not workable, that only solves the problem of jury selection and a place for people to sit on these large dockets.
But even going there, I mean, we still have security issues and all kinds of other
I don't
things.
think you could do it for a criminal trial. I think
Right.
you could do it for a civil trial. But, you know, if you know, the gallery thing would be nice, but I think if you look at the things that we looked at, the gallery solves the problem of jury selection in the long trials, solves the problem of where you put all the people, because not just the defendant comes to court.
Right.
And we're not just the juvenile comes to court. Juvenile, I've got more people in a juvenile case than you can get in criminal cases. So it solves that problem. But, you know, if we can't do that, there's only so much space, then building a courtroom with a larger well that would be more efficient to try cases for, that would be safer to try criminal cases for, that would be more ADA accessible. You know, maybe that's the 3 out of 4
Okay.
that we can get done.
That's all I got.
Jeff?
I don't know. None of it works together real good. If you want one that's set up for hearing cases, it's not set for picking a
Yeah.
jury. So, in the room that we have in the old jail and old sheriff's house, I don't even know if there's enough room to get everything you want on one floor for one room.
I mean, the old existing facilities, just using that space, you can cannot address either issue. You can't create a courtroom with 100 seats, period. That's not even an option. But you can't even create a courtroom with 30 seats and then have sufficient room inside the well. I mean, that space works under no circumstance for either of the requirements, much less ADA, which requires additional space.
I mean, if you look at the sort of the newer courtroom designs, like at Camdenton, at St. Charles, at the federal courthouse, I mean, you end up with the space, and you know, they don't have the large galleries, and you know, maybe that's an unrealistic.
Are we
But
better off?
They don't have the large dockets we have.
I mean, are we better off trying to take the existing courtroom and enlarge it and move some stuff around over into the old jail area rather than trying to put a new courtroom in there? I mean, that's what we've been looking at, is trying to put another courtroom over there.
I don't know how. I mean,
I don't know exactly.
to
either, but-
expand the existing courtroom, the only place where you don't have, and I know you got plans up, so I don't know. You're welcome to come up here and look, Judge. I mean, the only place you don't have load-bearing walls is this area, which means the only way to expand it is to take out the conference room and the holding cell, or to take out the marshal's area and the restroom.
But that's the only way to make it where it's going to be.
But and then you wouldn't be able to see, because that's load-bearing right there. So all you can do is take it back, which means the only way to get to the judicial offices is actually go through the courtroom.
Well, move the
Having spent
judges.
3 years downstairs, that's kind of hard when you try to work in
Yeah.
the courtroom.
Or to put the balcony back in, but that takes up space on the upper floor. Right.
Yeah. And that only solves one issue then. That room, I don't know that courtroom, just because of the way the load-bearing walls are, could ever be ADA compatible
Right.
under any circumstance. Best case scenario.
But you could probably take, I mean, if you disregarded where the doors are, and that's a rate limiting step, I think, where the doors are, I mean, you could move that bar back and create the larger well. I mean, your door's in the wrong place. But I mean, so space-wise, you probably could use that same sort of space, just orient it differently, and accomplish, you know, most of the other goals.
I know in talking with Donnie, he has concerns about transporting prisoners through the hallway to the holding cell and whatnot, and I can see where that could be an issue if, you know, multiple people came to watch, and so that could be a security issue. And I don't know, how is that addressed at some of the other courtrooms? Is there a secure way to bring the prisoners in, or?
Most modern courtroom design has basically 3 layers. They have public access area, they have restricted access area, and they have secure access area. Secure path is basically from detention to the courtroom for maybe defendants. Restricted access is where the court personnel are, but the general public isn't, and then public access is there.
So there's an alternate way to get the prisoners into court.
Yeah. But you know, right now we move them through the hallway.
Okay. I don't have anything else. I know I'm meeting with the Architects Alliance tomorrow at 1 to just kind of look at
I think I'm there.
some options.
I'm meeting with them at 2, I believe.
So
I got 10:30, so we got to be done by 10:30 tomorrow.
We'll be done by 10:20 today, because I beat the Capitol at 10:30.
So
okay.
So basically, if we redo, I mean, because when we were looking at putting a courtroom into the new same footprint, it wasn't really going to be much different than this, and that's really not.
You know, I think Carrie's comment was it's not even. I'm not even sure it was the same size as that courtroom. If
So-
it was, it was right
it
on.
was like 1,500 square feet, isn't it?
It was.
Depends on what you look at. If you're looking at where your clerks are at, where your
Oh.
chambers are at, where the holding cells, and it's not just the courtrooms that we got to look at. And if you look at just a courtroom, we can squeeze in what y'all have there, but that doesn't fix anything. Your well area that you're talking about, Mark even brought that up. He said you don't have enough room in there.
Yeah.
So is that something we need to address?
I mean, the reality of the existing buildings are they don't they in their existing footprint they cannot solve these problems.
Well, I think I think a lot of the plans that Kerry had drawn had judges' chambers and stuff on the same floor as the courtroom, and that, you know, although that might be an inconvenience to not be on the same floor as a court.
Boone County.
Yeah.
Boone County does it
So,
all on the same floor. So, I
yeah.
mean, it's just,
So you would sacrifice the convenience for the room inside the actual courtroom, possibly.
yeah. I mean, that's, like I said,
Okay.
Boone County's set up that way, where it's sort of like a maze, but.
It is,
I've tried
more
two-
is a maze than sort of like a
I've tried
maze.
2 or 3 cases up there where we come from downstairs and come up the stairs into the courtrooms, because they've got courtrooms on top of each other
Mhm.
in the Boone County edition.
Okay.
But like I said, you know, the well area solves a whole lot of the issues. I mean, it solves the practical issues of trying cases there. Mark can explain that probably better than I can do. It solves a lot of your ADA issues because you have the space to there. And it solves a lot of security issues because you have space. The space is what gives you the time to respond to the event.
So, I mean, I assume that we're going to need more than one courtroom that's ADA compatible. I mean, I think that's what we need to try to achieve. I mean, even if we have a new court space and you select a jury in a 100-gallery courtroom, you're still going to try to do the trial in another courtroom, and you may have to have a juror that's ADA, you know.
Well, I think that would be an issue that we would approach as we got there. I mean, we changed, for example, today, we moved Judge Joyce's trial from downstairs to upstairs so they could pick the jury
I see.
for Judge Green's trial. So sometimes it gets confusing and has a lot of shuttling that's involved.
But beyond the ADA, I mean, the well area, you know, we could modify some courtrooms, probably fairly inexpensive to accommodate more well area and maybe get that ADA accessibility into the jury box.
Well, like I said, I wasn't even addressing what we do with our existing courtrooms.
Right.
I just, you know, if we could get a courtroom there that was more functional, we at least have some answer.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, we're not far from looking at ADA plaintiffs that have ADA needs, defendants that have ADA needs. I mean, those are party issues. You could have lawyers with ADA needs, not counting witnesses, jurors, even judges. That was an issue down in Osage County when Judge Shaberco was in his car.
Mhm.
So, you know, I mean, as I'm finally telling Mark, I said, you know, in his job, he's got 100 mouths to feed and food to do. We could solve many of these issues with a larger well at the expense of gallery. You know, there's only so much you can do. But, you know, galleries are an issue. You asked us what we thought the space needs are, we told you that, but I think everybody, at least from our side of the bench, recognizes that, you know, there's some things you can't do, and if we could, you know, come back with a quorum that's more functional and meets all these other criteria, we're ahead of where we are.
Okay.
Other questions?
Not that I can think of. Thank you, though.
All right.
Thank you for coming up. Appreciate it, Judge. Thanks for taking the time out of your day. All right. I understand there's some folks here that might want to speak on this topic. So,
Sure.
Jerry, I think you indicated, talk to Chris about it. So, if you wouldn't mind coming forward and stepping up to the microphone, sitting at the microphone.
I've got a handout to pass out, if I could.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks, sir.
Anyone else? Here's some. Good morning. My name is Jerry Roslin. I just wanted to, my intent today is to present just a different viewpoint than what you've heard, you know, or seem to have heard. Just some thoughts that I had on the old jail. Just a little background on myself. I have worked for a mechanical contractor. I've done work in the Capitol, the Governor's Mansion, Loman's Landing, Carnegie Building, the courthouse, and the jail itself. So and numerous other buildings uptown here. I'm very intimate and familiar with historical structures. I'd like to present the viewpoint of what I see to do with this building. And basically, to me, it comes down to two things: practicality and aesthetics. A lot of it has to do, from a construction standpoint, practicality would say tear the building down, the entire building down, and start over again. Is what, from a construction standpoint, it's a lot easier. The way it is now, one of the options is to remove the upper floors until you get down to the lower one, and that's going to cost a little bit more money because you're going to have to take the time and the effort to ensure that you don't damage that lower floor. But by doing that, you still keep some of the historical perspective of that lower section. You still have the stone there. The building itself, and I've been inside of it, like I said, the old jail cells are gone. The only thing that's really shows any craftsmanship in the building is the exterior itself, is the stonework itself. And I'm not talking about the sheriff's building so much as I am the jail. You go inside the jail. Let's face it, it was designed to be a jail. It's just a massive structure. It doesn't have any craftsmanship. It doesn't have any elaborate brickwork or details or anything like that. It's just a massive building that is not very conducive to any change. You guys just spent the last 15, 20 minutes talking about not being able to use that building to reconfigure into the courtrooms or whatever. And that's part of my points in the practicality, is that it is not conducive to change. You will fight that building as long as that building is in its configuration that it is now. For the next however many 100 years, you will fight that building to do any sort of renovations or improvements to that building, just because of the design that it is now. The massive beams and columns that are in there now. It's just not very open to any sort of change. And with courtrooms changing, technology changing, everything like that, it's not going to help you any there. The floors don't match up. I would like to see, and a lot of other people like to see, some sort of continuity of design, and that comes with your practicality. You know, I'd like to see it match the courthouse. I believe the courthouse is a lot better looking structure than the stone is. I'd like to see it all kind of blend together. I don't want to see something like St. Mary's where you have the stone, you've got the steel, you've got the brick, you got a hodgepodge of different things. Miller Performing Arts was the same way until they came in and they stained it to make it all look the same color. A lot of us residents, we don't want something that looks like that. We want something that blends and then it goes together and it fits into the historical part of the courthouse. The floors don't line up right now. You're going to lose floor space because you've got to slope your ramps. You've got to make your ADA. There's just no continuity there. Eventually you're going to cover the parking lot that's behind the building here with building to add more space. So what are you going to do then? You're going to go down or you're going to go up to get into that old jail part, and you can go back down again and back up again. It's not going to be conducive to an overall plan, a master plan. And that's another thing that needs to be developed, and it's not going to fit into that. We can get that going now with this. That's going to help in the future with our other plans. Judge Beadham talked about the larger courtroom, and I think that is something needed. How many people in this room have been in jury selection? Okay, everybody's been packed into that room, haven't you? All right, but more than one day, you have had to come back because maybe they didn't get to you or something like that. To me, it seems to the residents of the county, it's going to be better to get more people in there than you can come in and say, you go, you're done, and then it's a much more efficient process, resulting in people being able to serve a lot easier and not losing time at work or what have you there, because some people don't have lead time. instead of using the resources to reconfigure that jail to meet the ADA, to meet the code regulations and everything like that, it's better to start from the ground up or from the first floor up with a new building that's designed to be a courtroom and offices, not something that's designed to be a jail to turn into this. The HVAC, the electrical, the installation values, communication, the data, all that stuff, it's going to come into play that you're going to end up spending more money putting that system in because you got to go around the beams, you got to go around the columns, you can't go through the floors, you got to beef up the floors. It all starts with your base. It all starts with your base. Once you get the base right and your frame right, then you can go from there. Future expansion. You don't have the beams and the columns there to inhibit that. Your floor lines match again. You're building with an eye towards the future. Your future expansion, it's all part of your master plan. It's all going to flow together. Aesthetics, that seems to be a large part of the what do you call it? Preservation is aesthetics. A lot of people say, yeah, I like that stone building. I like that stone building. I do too. But that's all it is the exterior. We can replicate the exterior if we had to get to that. If they can move a church from overseas and build it again in Westminster, we can do something like that. But again, it's just the outside. It's stonework. Yes, it's awesome stonework, but you're going to be leaving that lower level. So the rest of it can be built to match the existing courthouse. I believe our courthouse has a lot of grandeur to it. I think it's a pretty courthouse. I think it really speaks a lot for this county, and I'd like to see the design of that, be whatever future expansion is in this county is what I would like to see a continuation of. I'm done.
Any questions?
No, it's just a different one than we usually have because everybody's usually arguing to not tear it down. And I know you're not just saying go knock it down and being rude about it. And I've had people come up to me and literally say, knock the son of a gun down. And they don't have any qualms about it. So, it is refreshing to have somebody come up and present it this way.
And I realize the balance that you're striking with the one proposal to keep that lower level, which retains some of the historical aspect of it. Like I said, I tear the whole thing down. You're right, because I've been in it, I've worked in it, I know what you're going to be fighting and everything like that. But I understand how you can do that, and that would still give an example of that. But today I just wanted to present to you a different viewpoint than what you've heard, and let you know that there are feelings like this out there.
I appreciate the in-depth analysis, review, and the points.
Yep.
I think they're very helpful.
Yep. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you for taking your time today to come in. We do appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else like to get up and speak on this topic? Kathy, if you don't mind coming up to a microphone, please.
I just would like to say that I actually agree with Mr. Roslin. I think you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole by trying to do your courthouse, meet your courthouse needs in the old jail. And I do think that that is not going to be a productive endeavor for you. So I agree with him on that. I don't agree with him in that, you should just I think what he's saying is that you should continue to try to meet your court needs with maybe, tearing part of it down or tearing the jail down and start new there. I don't agree with that. I think that you should try to meet your court needs through other planning. And I've been watching the three of you and Judge Beadham talk about your courtroom needs. And it just reminded me of when my husband and I tried to remodel our 90-year-old house to, get a modern kitchen in there. We struggled and we just didn't know what to do, but then we got our contractor in, and he was able to figure out ways to accomplish what we wanted. He's not an architect. He is a contractor who specializes in old construction. And I would recommend that you get someone like that. Jim Wish might be a good person who knows how to do that if you're going to continue down the path of trying to work with the old jail. But actually, I think you should just let go of that idea and start at the beginning and look at the court's needs and try to figure out a different way, a very different approach. You are gobbling up the old, the city's core. The jail took a whole block to build the new jail. And now we're over on this side of the street, and we have the courthouse, and we're talking about keeping that. But the old jail is threatened. Someday, you may look at, having to deal with removing the city annex or the county annex. You guys are just, not you guys, but the county is basically consuming this part of the inner core of the city. And I think at this point, the county should stop and really come up with a broader plan so that you're not constantly looking at demolishing the older structures to meet your needs. And again, I think that we all need to walk away with trying to meet the court's needs in that old building. So I do agree with Mr. Roslin on that. I just don't agree that you should tear down what's there and build new. I think you should look at other ways of accomplishing that.
Okay.
Any questions for Kathy?
I agree. We're trying to put a square peg into a round hole or whatever with the courthouse going in. There's not that much room. It seemed different when we first looking at it, but now that you have all the needs you actually need and not just wants. And we've talked at length about the old jail. But when you look at the old jail on the rock, doesn't it just look totally out of place next to the courthouse itself? Maybe not the sheriff's house, just the jail.
Right. Not to people who are more into historic preservation. If you go down any of the older streets of Jefferson City, especially East Capitol, if you look at the facades of the buildings, you'll see a very nice brick sometimes, and then on the sides you see a different color, a different shade. That is how, in the past, buildings were constructed. They used the nicer stone or brick on the facade, and then they used something else on the side. So to somebody like me who spends a lot of time in older parts of cities, it's not as odd looking as it is to people who are more into new construction. It's just a different perspective.
Well, I think that's kind of where I get confused, because we get beat up because we want to have it all look old and all the continuity of the age of it. But then if it looks out of place and it looks different, well, that's kind of neat too. But doing the front, the facade, that's usually your selling point. That's going to be your curb appeal, your front windows. On the side, you're going to use cheaper material generally, and so that's why it's done differently. So I don't know. It looks kind of out of place to me, and we've talked about it before.
Yeah.
Kind of like the St. Mary's, and Jerry brought that up. That's a very good point. When you drive by there and look at that, and you can kind of see how
Which
done.
is the St. Mary's complex is a set of buildings that just horribly conflict and are ugly together. It's bad.
Oh.
And yet,
They
in
worked
30
with what they had.
years, if they decide to tear down the red brick doctor's building over there, which matches nothing, somebody will say, that's a 60-year-old building. We can't tear it down.
Well,
Well,
somebody
just because it's 60 years old doesn't mean that it offers any particular aesthetic value. I use your example of the cheaper construction on the sides. Which I mean, my understanding of the historic reason you built cheaper construction on the side was in part because if you ever decided to do extensive work on the building, you could take all that out. And nobody would have any complaint because you were taking out junk. And you could put in, if you wanted to do an expansion on a building, an old building on Capitol Street, and some of those additions you're talking about are expansions. They knocked out the side stuff and threw it away and built a different expansion on the side.
Well,
That was the reason that the cheaper materials were used on sides as opposed to in the front where you wanted to have a view, for lack of a better term.
I'm talking about the main structure. I'd be glad sometime to walk down East Capitol with anybody and point these out. You're talking about the original building. The side will be a blonde brick and the front will be a red brick. And that's not unusual at all. it's how areas developed. It's part of the the history of the area. So it's just not. I know a lot of people are struggling with the stone being what it is, being different and not finished. And I did also want to point out, Mr. Roslin talked a lot about how you're going to be fighting with that, and really it's comparable to the wall around MSP. I know some people say, tear down the wall so you can, build new stuff and showcase things, but that wall is the part of the history of the site. And Mark, I think when the library wanted to be over there, you maybe proposed putting it on a corner and removing the wall so it could be seen. Well, from a historic preservation viewpoint, that wall is part of the history, and it's not, it's just an old wall, but that is what makes the site kind of special. So that's where you do get
I don't know. I
into
want to
that
debate the old wall because the purpose of the wall was twofold. One was to keep people in that were bad. The second portion of the wall was to make sure that nobody inside the city could see inside the land. If you're going to develop an area, you want to have people be able to see inside. I'm not sure I want to get into a big, and I'm not sure that's the
Yeah.
purpose or point here.
But
I do want to make a point. I think those are apples and oranges.
Well, you're
to
always
compare.
going to be fighting that wall. You're always going to be fighting that wall. It's just part of
And
what it
in
is.
many other places, those walls have been, and it's not just in this community, it's lots of other ones, those walls have been taken down and preserved in a small portion as a representative element. I mean, part of the Berlin Wall's in Fulton. They took down the Berlin Wall. But they saved portions of it. If you go to Berlin, they saved portions of the wall. They didn't save all of it. They took most of it down. And I mean, you could tear down the jail and save some of the brick. I guess it's limestone. You could save some of the limestone. I mean, you don't just because something has a different style doesn't mean it has to be preserved in its entirety. I don't think we want the wall around the prison preserved in its entirety. But then you can't get into the site.
Well,
I mean, you got to have access points. Or do you not want to develop the site? I mean, the reality is it's a prison. We should keep it as a prison. We should never develop it. Because by developing it, you're going to change the feel, the character, the history, the structure. Time does move forward. We should never destroy things just to destroy them. I mean, I think we all agree on that. On the other hand, we have to move forward and address the issues and the concerns that we're presented with. And if there's another option, we've spent a lot of time. This is year 4 of this discussion. And we spent a lot of time discussing other options. And the problem with the other options are every time we discuss another option, it turns out not to be a good option. I think 4 years is a long time to study, discuss, spend money on experts, have public meetings, have public discussion about a topic. At some point, you have to make decisions. And I'm at a position where, and I'm not shy about my opinions, as you well know.
Yes. We all know that.
It's time to make decisions. Because we have studied this for 4 years. It's not time, I think, to go back and start all over again and study it the 5th time or the 6th time or hire a different architect or get a different contractor to look at it. We've gone through a very long, extensive process on this. It's time to make decisions. And I appreciate the input because that's part of the decision-making process.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the chance to speak up.
Yep. No, thanks.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks.
Any other comments? Terry?
I just have a quick question going back to, I hear from a lot of different people, I've heard from a lot of different people in the past few weeks about using the new jail. And with the judge here, maybe he can clarify some of this because I've had a few discussions with different people, and I know we keep going back to, they say that criminal cases cannot be tried in a jail. But I do know that we have courts in Blue Springs and Christian County that try, I think, drug court, juvenile courts that are in facilities that have the jail and the courtroom in one facility. Is there any way that we could use space in the new jail that we could free up, maybe move some of those cases that aren't criminal, but some of those cases over there and use that area to free up space in the existing courthouse?
Are you talking about moving like juvenile and drug court cases?
Possibly, or anything. I mean, we hear the criminal stuff, and I'm not sure if that's in statute or case law or what, the basis for that is. But in talking to several people since, that was brought up, they mentioned that, there are courts around the state that have drug court and some of the civil cases that are in structures that are one. There's a jail and a courtroom all together, and they said that it's possible that those cases could be moved over there if you added on, use some of the empty space there, converted that into a courtroom, and try some of those cases there, and then that would free up your existing courtrooms.
The issue on criminal trials themselves is a constitutional issue. And the last time I looked, there was at least 7 jurisdictions that ruled on that particular point that you can't hold a criminal trial in a jail.
Right.
Don't confuse, there are a number of facilities that have detention or jail facilities directly attached to them, but their primary function is a courthouse.
Okay.
When you move, drug court itself is probably not very space intensive. Actually, drug court needs, they have all these, they have the staffings and everything else like that. So, I mean, drug court might be twice a week. You could do drug court over there. You probably don't have the constitutional issues arising with that. But I don't know that it gains you anything, because those are not demand-intensive dockets. I mean, you're talking about 20 people.
Okay.
So I don't know. You're not going to free up very much to do that part of it. With respect to juvenile court, and I would invite you to come on a Wednesday afternoon when I have juvenile court. If I've got 50 cases, for every juvenile case there's a juvenile and a guardian ad litem, and parents attorneys, juvenile officer attorneys. I mean, the crowds are fairly significant, and I know Mark has been through there on a Wednesday afternoon where we do. And that would move that docket over there. But when you move things out of this building, then you remove it from our security envelope where we do the screenings, and you have to duplicate all those services over at the other building. Now, it's not my job to address a building where the design is to bring in 150 people that all have to go through security screening. That means you don't have the constitutional problems with doing that. You have some practical problems with doing that.
But since it's already a secure building, I mean, I guess I would ask the sheriff that. Would it be extremely costly to? Because I know I keep hearing from a lot of people, we have this $30 million facility, and we know that there's empty space, and people are interested to see why we're not using it, and if we could make better use of it.
There's twofold. Anything south of the alley is designed to have prisoners,
right.
And you can't put juveniles inside or sound
right.
of adult prisoners.
Okay.
So if you build something down there, it's a temporary, short-term fix, because if you did that, when the time comes to expand, now you have adults in the same area, and so then you have a conflict with any juvenile. The shelf space north of the alley, literally it's whatever the commission decides to do with it. It's not within our security envelope. And when you're talking about the security envelope that the judge was addressing, it's different than the jail envelope. You're talking about bringing public access individuals into the facility, setting up screening, x-ray machine, which in and of itself is a pretty horrendous expense. But you're talking about the staffing for that also for short-term court, really. And I don't think it's cost effective in any sense of the nation.
Okay. I was just curious because, I mean, we're supposed to be looking at all options here, I think, and, when we see that we have, and I toured the jail, and it's very, very nice, and we gave a great tour of it. But, when you see this empty space, aside from where we I'm not talking about the huge space that we saw where you're going to add jail cells eventually, but, the other empty space that, you see it and you wonder why we couldn't use that when we're talking about tearing down some, historical buildings that people care about, then it becomes hard to put those two together and say, okay, I see empty space and I hear that we need room, and here it is across the street, but let's go tear this down and build another building.
Shy
That's
of the one shell space north of the alley, that's accessed off of Adam Street. Everything else was designed so we didn't get in the same problem that we had before when we outgrew the old jail. And as soon as we do that, we come very close to putting us in, looking at another jail construction within 20 years probably. And that doesn't seem, with the cost of new construction, that doesn't seem a particularly good design, particularly jail construction, which is just extremely intensive cost factors. And that's why they even put the interstitial floor in, to save that much of the money for that next construction.
right. And I realized that area. I was thinking more of the, yes, that's what I was thinking more of, is that area there, possibly, because I know that has been looked at, and, I'm not sure what the plans are for that, but right now, that's there. And
We also received, just you and I talked about it, so I'll talk about it publicly if that's okay, Greg. The Western District Court of Appeals ruled today on the lawsuit we were involved in. It deals with the law enforcement fund. And a component of that opinion is that the law enforcement fund, which paid for the jail, can only be used for law enforcement purposes, which is the sheriff's operating expenses and the jail operating expenses. And we think it has to be related to criminal matters. Putting a juvenile court over there probably will not comply with what the Western District said today, which puts us in another issue, which is we would then theoretically jeopardize the entire sales tax.
on it. And that's something that you couldn't put back up for people to vote on, that it could be used for multiple.
I mean, that would require going back to the voters. Actually back to the vote, a full vote of countywide residents, either to amend the existing law enforcement sales tax, or if it was thrown out, to reimpose the sales tax, which would then jeopardize our bond issue. Because we're paying for the jail too. And that literally, I just printed out. It got handed down this morning.
But if we did do it, we could rent it from the law enforcement fund. Technically.
I'm not sure we can do that or not after that opinion.
Don't get me wrong, I'm not wanting to jeopardize the law enforcement fund.
No, I literally after that opinion, I'm not sure we
But,
can even rent. I'm not even sure we can rent the space for a non-law enforcement purpose.
We're
after
just
the
throwing
opinion.
everything out there, so if we're going to look at everything.
Jeopardizing that fund would mean jeopardizing the bond payments, which would mean jeopardizing our credit rating. And that's a road none of us want to take the chance of going down unless it was an absolute. That would be an absolute necessity issue, not an optional issue.
So the prosecuting attorney's office would not be considered part of law enforcement?
I think it would be because it prosecutes criminal.
So they could
matters.
possibly be moved over there.
And that's actually an option we're exploring.
On it.
Yeah. Right. In fact, that's a component of the whole master plan is, we would like, I think we've all been fairly candid about it, we'd like to get out of the Carnegie building. The only way to get out of the Carnegie building is to find a space where the folks that are in the Carnegie building could go. One option would be to move the prosecuting attorney into the jail facility, the sheriff's side of the jail facility,
North alley. Yeah,
and then
jail space.
move the assessor over into this building, which would serve certain benefits because you'd have assessor, collector, and recorder in the same facility. Because we don't want to deal with that building anymore because that one has become expensive and difficult to maintain.
You're not going to tear that down, too.
No, not going to tear it down.
Okay.
In fact, somebody would. That's the one. If we can get this all worked out, we might be willing to give it away for $1.
Is there any way that I could see the plans again for the courthouse that they came up with last week?
The last set of plans, last week's.
Yes. Okay.
Sorry. I don't have them electronically. I
That's
apologize
okay.
for that.
That's all I have, so thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else on this issue? All right. right, seeing none, I think our next agenda on this issue is when? You guys remember?
No, we got
I know the 16th we're up. I think is that the next one we have that actually is specific? This issue. Our next agenda that we would have things on could potentially be the 10th, and I don't know if we will have a report from Architects Alliance on the 10th or not, or whether that won't occur until the 16th. But we'll make, if you watch our website, we'll make sure that's posted as soon as, if something goes on, it will be posted. All right.
you probably gotta get going, huh?
I'm going to have to go here shortly.
You meeting with architects tomorrow?
Yes, at 2 p.m., I believe.
I think it'd be interesting for him to note what differences we're gonna probably all, it might be more fun meeting separately with them than all three of us, just to see what different ideas or which ways we're leaning in.
Right.
Because
Tomorrow, too.
with the courtroom, there's all kinds of different needs. I don't know how they're all gonna be met that way. I'm interested to see it, so.
All right.
Guess if no else, we can talk more tomorrow.
Any other items come for the commission? Seeing none, I entertain a motion to stand in recess.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We'll stand in recess. Thank you all.
I don't think option one, option three is what I was interested in. That seemed to be the one last time. This one.
But that language does, I mean, I'll tell you, you need to read it and leave me an opinion on it. But it pretty much says,
I know
law
what was
enforcement
three
services,
the
law
one they said
enforcement
was too
services,
expensive.
not revenue.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, do you remember which option that, the one that sounded most feasible was the one where they raised, do you know which plan that was?
I'm not sure that this is in there. It's,
Oh, okay.
this might be the old.
The
I
old
don't know, I don't know
one
if we got a copy of raising the roof,
on there.
This, we need to mark
so
this
basically it'd
one. This is, we
it'd
should
be this one. This is still within the structure. And it'd just be taken
The roof.
turn our volume really
And
low.
can I ask you a question now? If you guys,
Yeah,
and
no,
I don't
when
want
you
this to
listen
happen,
back
but
to it, you can barely hear him.
depending
So
on
I
what
don't
goes
know
on,
if we can take a piece of string and tie
is
it
there
around.
an option in your mind where
Something.
the sheriff's house would stay?
You know, somehow to
You know,
permanently mark it, so we know.
I mean, I
that's
just,
what we're doing. 'Cause
if
I don't know what
worse
happened
comes to
the
worse,
sticky notes we had on it.
you know, and I know Heather doesn't want this, but if you had, if something, if, you know, you had to.
Yeah, it's
is-
not, I mean.
Is this building something that people are more likely to say would be, have an aesthetic value? I know, I feel like the whole structure does in my mind, the whole thing. But, you know, this to me is important. And I know they were talking a lot about the jail, but I didn't hear a whole lot about this. And that was kind of, I was wondering if that's in anybody's mind, you know. I mean, I don't want to see, I think, I don't want to see any of it go.
So I was like, gotta
And
go
I
tell
don't-
Betty right
I
now.
think there's ways,
We need to
but,
mark it.
you know, I keep hearing more about this structure than about this, so that's why I'm confused. Is there,
Well, and some of the problems in here lie, and I don't know if you've really looked at it, but this floor line out of here does run right through all these windows here. And so, you know, even if any of this stayed, the windows ideally would have to be moved. So there'd have to be some, if you aligned the floors. If you didn't align the floors, then you got different level issues for ADA and stuff. Ideally, what we were looking at was trying to bring everybody through this area here, make this a secure area, and then keep everything ADA accessible. And but with the floor differentiation, except for the third floor does line up, but these two don't.